by inviting our first speaker, who represents one of the co-chairs of the compact, which is the government of Mexico, the other being the government of France. I would now like to call on Ambassador Alicia Buenrostro, Deputy Permanent Representative of Mexico, to give us her inspiring remarks. Ambassador Buenrostro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me there?
Yes, we hear you very clearly.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Global Network of Women Peace Builders and all the organizations involved in the design of this event for the invitation. Needless to say how timely this dialogue is, as you have said, as we mark not only the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action, but also the 20th anniversary of the landmark Security Council Resolution 1325. This is, as you have already said, an important time to reflect on the implementation of our commitments under the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and to identify the main challenges and gaps that remain regrettably large. The Generation Equality Forum, rescheduled for 2021, convened by UN Women and co-chaired by my country, Mexico, and as well as with France, with the meaningful participation of civil society, you know that it will seek to forge multi-stakeholder partnerships to transform the promises we made 25 years ago in Beijing into tangible and concrete actions to achieve gender equality in this new decade of action. In light of COVID-19, the initiative to create a compact on women, peace and security and humanitarian action as part of the forum is more relevant than ever. In order to accelerate implementation of the commitments, strengthen accountability, enhance international cooperation, and mobilize funding for the WPS agenda and humanitarian action frameworks at all levels. At this point, I would like to congratulate all civil society organizations which were behind this proposal. Their tireless efforts and advocacy led to this achievement. But let me share with you that Mexico will officially launch its own national action plan for the implementation of Security Council 1325 very soon. We have formally adopted a feminist foreign policy, placing gender equality at the heart of all our foreign policy actions and our multilateral diplomacy. This includes, of course, our commitment to the WPS agenda and, of course, our engagement in the forum. In fact, the gender equality agenda has historically been one of the top priorities of Mexico's foreign policy, and as an elected member of the Security Council for 2021-2022, my country will keep bringing forward the WPS agenda multilaterally. To this end, we have expressed our desire to co-chair the informal expert group on WPS in order to bring the views and perspectives of the Global South to the discussion. We recognize that we have a strong global normative framework regarding WPS and humanitarian action. Its main challenge remains the implementation on the ground. The compact, in line with the principles of the GEF, will be able to build alliances with multiple stakeholders and push forward this agenda while supporting the actions already in place and while strengthening synergies across existing mechanisms, taking stock of the experiences and lessons learned so far. And its work should be closely related with the actions undertaken by the action coalitions, bringing added value to all efforts that have been undertaken, avoiding duplications. COVID-19 has exacerbated pre-existing inequalities and challenges faced by women and girls around the world, in particular for those who experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. Its impact on women and girls living in conflict-affected countries and humanitarian settings is even worse. The pandemic is threatening to reverse progress in the implementation of the WPS agenda, and we cannot wait anymore to take bold action. In this regard, the compact, in the same line as the 6 action coalitions of the forum, should ensure an intergenerational and intersectional approach. developing the skills and capacities of youth movements and leadership to promote full, equal, and meaningful participation of local women, youth, mediators, and grassroots. Women peace builders must remain one of our top priorities. These coalitions are transforming the lives of their communities, even in these challenging, difficult times, being in the front line of response to the pandemic, facing threats and persecution for their work. It is clear that to strengthen synergies with the youth, peace, and security agenda will be crucial, not only for the successful implementation of the compact, but also to build better and overcome this crisis. Dear friends, let's work together to advance this agenda and give it all the visibility required in the Generation Equality Forum. The strong support, guidance, and inputs of other partners like civil society-led networks and women's organizations are crucial to ensure that the compact will be fit for purpose. We are very eager to listen to your recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ben Rostro, for that very insightful and inspiring remarks. And congratulations to Mexico on its National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. And we're also excited that you will be joining the Security Council beginning next year. So we are guaranteed that we have another strong ally within the Security Council.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Moving on with our program, I'm now very honored to present Ambassador Delphine O from France, who serves as the Secretary General of the Generation Equality Forum 2021. Ambassador Delphine O, you have the microphone.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I hope everyone can hear me well. I would like to extend congratulations to the organizers of this very important and very timely event. Indeed, as you all know, we are in a very important year, celebrating 2 anniversaries, the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action and Declaration, and the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325. And I know that particularly this month of October is propitious to a lot of celebration. This conversation is very important. On the national level, France has always been and will remain a staunch supporter of Resolution 1325. It is always defending the full and effective implementation of this resolution whenever it can and wherever it can in all the multilateral arenas and circles where we are active, especially at the national security, at the UN Security Council. We will continue to push for very ambitious UN language regarding the place of women peace builders, women peacemakers in Resolution 1325. I would like to also use this opportunity to announce that France will adopt its 3rd National Action Plan according to Resolution 1325 very soon, I hope before Christmas of this year. It's currently being finalized by our teams, and I do hope that it will be even more ambitious than our 2 previous National Action Plans. It is, of course, part of French feminist foreign diplomacy, which was adopted after Sweden and Canada. Which is a very comprehensive feminist diplomacy. In the context of COVID, which we cannot avoid, France is particularly concerned by the gross violations committed on women in conflicts and by the increased use of rape and sexual violence and sexist violence against women as a weapon of war. This is the reason why last year, when France was hosting the G7 presidency, we helped support the Global Fund for Survivors of Sexual Violence and Conflict, which was launched by the 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, Denis Mukwege and Nadia Mourad. We're also very concerned as the French government, as one of the champions of the Action Coalition on Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, by the increased denied access to sexual and reproductive health and rights to women, especially in areas of conflict. Now to the Compact for Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action. Madam Chair, you mentioned 2 distinguishing features of this compact. One, it is and will be one of the key outcomes of the Generation Equality Forum, alongside the 6 action coalitions that you're aware of. And 2, it is a multi-stakeholder partnership. And in that sense, it is a very challenging process for all of us together working towards this compact and towards the forum, because it is for the first time that we are gathering around the same table representatives from governments, from international organizations, from CSOs, from youth-led organizations, and from the private sector, as you pointed out. So it is a process as well as it is an outcome, and we are delighted to be hearing the recommendations and suggestions from civil society to make this compact as effective, as comprehensive as possible. Thank you very much. I'd just like to add that last week during the Beijing+25 high-level event for the United Nations General Assembly, President Macron of France has announced that the forum, the Generation Equality Forum, will take place in June 2021 in Paris. So we do hope to be hosting and welcoming all of you in Paris next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Delphine O, and thank you for the exciting information that you have shared with us today. And we look forward to meeting everyone in Paris in the beginning of summer next year. I also would like to remind our audience members again to check the bios of our speakers on the Q&A box. This is women's leadership at its best, what we need desperately during these times and beyond. I now would like to continue with our program, and I have the honor to present Ms. Åsa Regner, Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. And we have specifically invited Ms. Regner to share with us more information on the compact, what it is about, what are its distinct features, how would it guarantee acceleration of women, peace and security and humanitarian action commitments, because as we know, there are still many questions on what it is, given that there are 6 action coalitions, and then there is the compact. And I also would like to mention here that the compact is a result of the strong advocacy of civil society that have been working on women, peace and security, youth, peace and security agenda, as well as humanitarian action. And we are very grateful to the leadership of the Generation Equality Forum, the government of Mexico, the government of France, UN Women, and of course, our civil society representatives to the leadership. So I would now like to welcome Åsa to share with us all of those information and insights about the compact. Åsa, you have the microphone.
Thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here today. And I see in the chat box that people are connecting from all over the world, and that is very inspiring. And I also want to echo the thank yous to the civil society, the global network of peace builders, and the many networks and organizations that have supported the Generation Equality Forum process. So thanks for your commitments and your advocacy for strong outcomes on women, peace and security. My friends from Mexico and France already mentioned some of the things I wanted to say, and I will try to not repeat that, but rather use the time for perhaps for other information. I think that's a good sign of the alignment we have working together on the Generation Equality Forum. And the original thought, which we will stick to, is that all the 6 action coalitions will also have actions which are relevant to women, peace and security, because those topics are all relevant to push the agenda when it comes to women, peace and security, and for sustaining peace and women's participation in peace agreements, talks, and as signatories. I think it is also important to say that the starting point that we have, at least so far, is to push for implementation. We have, as was pointed out earlier, agreements on this. We have agendas, very strong ones. They were pushed forward by civil society, not least. And this has caused a lot of attention in a positive way. We know that there is a lot of political commitment and also rhetorics about women, peace and security, which is a good thing. But at the same time, we also know 25 years after the Beijing platform, the meeting in Beijing, as well as 20 years after the adoption of the Security Council Resolution 1325, that implementation is lagging behind. Many of you, I'm sure, will be interested to read the report that the Secretary General will present together with the Executive Director of UN Women on the 29th of October in the open debate in the Security Council, where this report will be presented and discussed more in detail. But I think that in that we will all see how important the implementation is and what needs further to be done. And I know that those of you in this meeting are the experts on all of this, so I think it's rather discussion about how to do that. And we want the compact to definitely be a vehicle for that important progress. We know, and I'm happy we've already talked about national action plans, for example, around 1325, but we also know that only a quarter of the countries which have national action plans have also actually put forward a budget for the implementation of the plans. And that is another feature that's very much lacking. And that's why, as many of you have said, we need the broader partnerships with all the actors that you said. But most importantly, we need the drive and leadership from the women's movement, from civil society, from youth groups, from indigenous women, from peace builders all over the world who want to explain their demands and expectations on this work. Yes, I said already, we want the compact to work together with the action coalitions, because we don't want the compact to be an isolated thing, and we want the action coalitions to respond to the needs in terms of the women, peace and security agenda. I also think that in relation to the COVID situation that many of you alluded to already, I think we have seen very important both setbacks and other observations. And you spoke about the violence, both the violence in the conflicts, which spiked many times and harmed women further. But we also see increasing levels of men's violence against women, men as partners violence against women spiking in general in the world. We estimate about 20 to 30%, but specifically in conflict zones. And when we talk to women in the conflict zones, which we do on a daily basis, that's our job with our staff in the field, they also observe that the lack and the loss of women's own income has become an enormous obstacle to anything women want, need, and have the right to do. And many times whole societies and municipalities fall apart because of the lack of income that women generated. As very often, this has not been acknowledged before, but when women's incomes disappear, they have a great difficulty to exercise their own rights, but it also means that the hunger is increasing for children, and that whole communities actually fall apart much quicker, and thus also makes whole communities more vulnerable to the false, so to speak, offers from terrorist groups, warlords, and so on. So, I mean, there is a lot for us to work on, both the agendas that we already had, but also the knowledge and the data and evidence we have from the COVID situation. I think it is also important to try to bring in boys and men in the work that we do on women, peace and security in any way possible. There are lots of aspects of this, of course, and I look forward to hearing your comments on that. So the compact, which will be presented more in detail also during the open debate and the Women, Peace and Security Week, will have a board as well as catalytic memberships. And the strong leadership and expertise of a very diverse group that we want, I already alluded to, will drive this work forward. So the compact will be developed by the board together with all the catalytic members and in a very inclusive process, and launched at the Paris Forum in June 2021, as we heard, and together with the government of Mexico, as we also already heard. What I can say, I think more in concrete terms, and I also have my team with me, should you have more detailed questions, can answer more detailed questions about how we're working on it. But we are setting up both the board, we get interest from member states and organizations, and we will design in a very inclusive process the priorities for the compact, and we will also present more details about it at the end of this month during the open debate and the Women, Peace and Security Week. But I'm happy to answer any question, but most of all listen to your inputs from today's meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Executive Director Regner. I can see that our audience members are actively raising points and questions that we would invite you and other colleagues to address later. Thank you so much for presenting the broad range of issues that we are facing, that the compact would take all effort to address, but also in emphasizing our collective power, our expertise, and the potential resources that we would be able to generate when we work together under the compact. We're very excited to, about the event that will be organized around the end of the month when the governance structure of the compact will be introduced. Without further ado, I would now continue with our program. And at this point, we will turn to other actors who are also sharing the leadership in the compact. And I would like to start by inviting our good friend, Ambassador Victoria Suleimani, the Deputy Permanent Representative of Sierra Leone. And I believe she is also representing the government of Sierra Leone in the Executive Board of UN Women. Ambassador Suleimani, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and Madam ASG and Deputy Executive Director, good morning. And I say good morning to the two co-chairs of the Generation Equality Forum and the distinguished panelists and our listeners and viewers around the world. It is with great pleasure that I join this conversation. And I really want to thank you, all the co-sponsors of this event, especially particularly Global Network of Women Peace Builders, that really extended a special invitation for me to speak and to share some of our thoughts on the topic of discussion. As a country that has tasted the bitterness of war, we have tasted an epidemic, the Ebola virus disease, and now we are all in COVID together. We continue to uphold the core tenets and values of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. And to demonstrate this commitment, we have done it in an unwavering manner, and we have continued to provide by providing policy and legal environment for the protection of women and girls and their inclusion in decision-making, peace building, and development processes at all levels. So experience has taught us from the Ebola that, and even now that we're in the COVID and before the Ebola, we had the 11-year civil war. We have learned that in situations of conflict, there's a tendency to focus more on either the war or the disease, and you totally neglect the shadow pandemic. This is what UN Women has come to call it, the shadow pandemic, which is sexual and gender-based violence. So we are guided by that, and our COVID-19 response, we have mainstream gender perspective into all our COVID-19 response and recovery strategies that we have adopted so far. Now I can proudly announce to you that Sierra Leone has a second generation national action plan. I thought I was going to say this proudly, but France has gone ahead and said they have a third one. So I'm not competing there with anybody right now. But the beauty about our own national action plan is that we have combined 2 of the 10 resolutions, specifically the 1325 and 1820 on sexual violence, because the level of rape escalated to a point wherein the president had to declare a state of emergency. And since then, he has really taken these issues at the highest level. It is the president driving the issue of sexual and gender-based violence. He has gone ahead to open 6 one-stop centers on SGBV and a very unique special court on rape, with the commitment to permanently fix, this were his words, SGBV. So this is how far we have come with the implementation of 1325. But then, laudable though these actions may sound, we in Sierra Leone believe we still need to do more. So this was why we joined the advocacy in a subtle manner. We spoke severally in many quarters at very high levels, and we advocated for the establishment of this compact. And we are pleased that it has happened, and we really want to congratulate all the actors and the civil society organizations that really drove this, the establishment of this compact. That said, Madam Moderator, I want you to permit me to quickly share the thoughts on why we believe the creation of the compact was a move in the right direction. I'll just share with you some few reasons. We in Sierra Leone believe it is a holistic agenda for women, peace and security, and the humanitarian component. So this is now going to galvanize transformative actions by all stakeholders to fast-track the implementation of the WPS and HA agendas. The compact also, we believe, provides intergenerational dialogues. It will bring that intergenerational dialogue, which we have benefited from in Sierra Leone, because it will create that sense of national ownership. So with our first NAP, we got this experience when we wrote our first NAP. It had a very strong ownership, national ownership, wherein all stakeholders were involved. So that intergenerational dialogue that we bring is a good idea. And then the third reason why we believe it is a move in the right direction is that it will bring together diverse global, regional, national, local women, young women, peace builders, human rights defenders, and humanitarian actors. The compact is definitely going to enhance coordination for the implementation of the existing norms, because we strongly believe that business as usual cannot work anymore. We need to translate commitments into practice. We have to walk the talk. The compact also, we believe, will strengthen the inclusion of women peace builders and women humanitarian defenders and humanitarian and decision-making in all decision-making processes. We also believe that the compact is going to mobilize financing from donor community, and it will also encourage government to allocate budget for implementation of national action plans. We have identified the need to conduct with our second NAP. This is what we identified, that there is need to conduct costing and budgeting using gender responsive budgeting principles. So what we did with this second NAP was that we ensured we have a realistic budget. And then secondly, we will be able to raise all the funds needed because we want the funders to be aware of what the cost of the plan is, so that we have done ahead. And then the other reason is we renew commitment to strengthening accountability, because everybody was just doing it in silos. So we want to break the silos and let there be accountability. People should come and report on how they are pushing this agenda of women, peace and security and humanitarian action. The compact will also promote awareness on the linkage between women, peace and security, humanitarian action frameworks, and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So in that regard, we will continue to strengthen partnerships, which has worked for us. We will adopt a whole of the nation approach to this process, and we will involve various government ministries. We are not going to say, oh, it's only the Ministry of Gender. No, gender perspective is being mainstreamed into all the ministries, Ministry of Development, Ministry of Health, because every issue seems to have a gender dimension. So it is the whole of the nation approach down to the grassroots. So I want to add also that Sierra Leone has formally expressed its support for the compact, and we have done it in writing, and our support for this compact is coming from the highest political level, and we stand ready to mobilize support for other member states and even regional support for the signatory of this compact, should we be considered to be on the membership structure, because we have officially submitted express interest in the membership of the compact. I want to conclude by reiterating our commitment to the guiding principles of the generational equality and the priorities of the Women, Peace and Security HA Compact. As we eagerly await the announcement of the membership of the compact, we will pledge to work assiduously should we become one of them, so that we'll make this compact fitter for purpose as the year go by. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Suleimani, for sharing your hopes as well as for stressing again your commitment to the compact. I recall that Sierra Leone is one of the very first member states who have demonstrated their support to civil society advocacy for the intentional integration of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agenda in the Generation Equality Forum, which has now resulted into the establishment of the compact. And I take note of your announcement of a new national action plan, and how you also elaborated on your experiences and lessons learned in managing the Ebola pandemic, because we've been having the Global Network of Women Peace Builders is running a series of civil society consultations on national action plans, and almost all of civil society actors who have been involved in national action planning are looking into NAPs as a key instrument, not just responding to the conflict, but also responding to the pandemic and other crises. So thank you once again, and congratulations on the NAP, and also congratulations again to Mexico and France for their national action plans. We're continuing on our program. I am very pleased and honored.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm logging off. I have a meeting in my capital, virtual meeting.
We understand, Ambassador Suleimani. Thank you so much for joining us. I now have the pleasure and honor to call in another friend representing civil society, and we are very grateful to her for her commitment in relaying all of the advocacy points of civil society to the Generation Equality Forum leadership, and for her hard work in the task force on this compact. I invite Ms. Sharon Bagwan-Rolls, Board Chair of the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict, or GPAC, to also share her thoughts along those lines that Ambassador Suleimani spoke about. How can the compact further strengthen partnership among member states, civil society, the UN, and regional organizations, as well as private sector? And how will it be different from other collaborations and that are aiming to deliver results on the Women, Peace and Security agenda and humanitarian action? Sharon? You have the
Well, very
floor.
good morning. Thank you, Mavic, and a very early good morning from the Pacific Island region. It's absolutely fabulous to be able to be joining all of you today and to start this wonderful commemorative month of the 20th anniversary of 1325 in what is also such a magnanimous year when we celebrate the legacy of women's rights and the feminist movement with Beijing+25. I've had the opportunity, as you said, Mavic, to be part of the task force through my membership of the Civil Society Advisory Group to the core group of Generation Equality Forum. And I guess the collaboration has started already. The collaboration has been the advocacy from women peace and security networks, from youth peace and security networks, from women on the front lines facing climate change as well as the COVID pandemic, in calling for a specific action for this compact on women, peace and security and humanitarian action. And I'd like to be able to also say that thanks to the advocacy and the power of civil society organizing in the early months of the work of the task force, soon after the compact concept was approved by or adopted by the core group, we have included a young woman peace builder to our task force. So we are certainly balancing the scales also in representation in getting the early stages of the work going forward. It's a humbling experience to represent the diversity of civil society across, bringing together the experience, the wisdom, the knowledge of the women's peace movements, networks, organizations, the diversity of organizations, including women with disabilities, the LGBTQI community. But it's all of you who we together are part of this consistent force of moving the compact forward. As it's been alluded to already, the task force is in the final stages of finalizing the governance structure, which will include the board that will have representation from member states, civil society, private sector, including women-led social entrepreneurs and academia. And so I wouldn't want to preempt the work of the board, but to say this is certainly an opportunity to hear and to table as part of the movement some of the thoughts as well. The other thing that's quite unique has already been highlighted is the catalytic membership for the compact, because this really recognizes also that the decision making and the drive of the compact is not going to just be limited to the board. So the catalytic membership, I think, is a wonderful way to also continue to engage in the process going forward. I just want to say very quickly that, in terms of the vision of the compact from a civil society perspective, certainly for GPAC, we are committed to drive a gender transformative agenda, both within the peace building community, within our own network, but also in partnership with other regional and global networks, and also build collaboration with regional intergovernmental organizations and the wider feminist peace and security movement. So I think that's one important aspect of the results, is to also see how civil society is strengthened in what are some very difficult times globally. I think it's also really important to see that the compact is going to move the agenda beyond the realms of the Security Council. While we must persist in holding the Security Council accountable, there are a number of other UN bodies where we must also see better synergies and linkages with the WPS, YPS, and humanitarian action. And one example this year that we have been engaging in, including from the regional and local level, is around the peace building architecture. There's the opportunity then to sort of really catalyze the way in which gender perspectives, the women's rights and feminist agenda can be infused into the many different tracks of work that's going on. And clearly there is a need to hold accountable also the spaces in regional intergovernmental organizations, and to ensure that resources are mobilized to support the local action, to support the national accountability. So I just want to focus for a bit, Mavic, on local action, because in the last week I've had an opportunity to take this work to women in rural Fiji. And right now there are about 7 centers being organized in my own Pacific region to get women to start to understand what is this big global agenda. So I think for many of the local women peace builders and first responders, this coming together of the peace and humanitarian nexus is also a reminder of how we are organizing when we're facing the realities, when our lives are not limited into silos of agendas. And this is part of the work that we're doing through the Shifting the Power Coalition. That's also part of the Feminist Humanitarian Network as well. And for us, for me as a Pacific Island feminist, as many of you are aware in your parts of the world as well, COVID-19 has come on top of many other crisis situations, but in particular, the climate crisis. But it was actually Pacific women peace builders who recognized this nexus or these interlinkages when we formulated or contributed to the Pacific Regional Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. And then in 2015, the UN Security Council 2242, in a sense, is a little bit of a precursor for this compact, because it actually notes the issues regarding climate change as well as the global nature of health pandemics. So we're building on this foresight and experience. The Secretary General himself has also talked about this triangulation of the 3 agendas. So for me, there are 4 areas that I think we should be thinking about. One is obviously targeted efforts and addressing the barriers to participation across the peace and security and humanitarian space. How do we also strengthen, support, resource women's localized and indigenous knowledge alongside the political space? How do we also support young women in intergenerational learning at all levels of decision making, and to create new spaces? And how do we also ensure that it's our local women's networks who are driving this agenda? So for me, this is an opportunity for 2020 and beyond to redesign the table, to catalyze the WPS and humanitarian action. And maybe in our conversation a little later on, we can also talk about, the commitments to localization through the grand bargain as well, and the the commitments around disaster management as well as humanitarian action. But I'll leave you with those thoughts for now, Mavic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for the profound presentation that you made today. I wanted to underscore your point about the need to always ensure that local women peace builders and first responders are sharing the space for discussion and decision making. We need to bring local voices into global policy spaces, and the importance or the critical importance of breaking down the silos, that is the primary message coming from local women, because they are the first ones to tell us, we understand that you are working on specific mandates, you're working on specific thematic areas or geographical focus, but we don't live our lives in mandates. We don't live our lives in silos. Our lives is one continuum of peace building, addressing humanitarian emergencies, decision making at all levels. Thank you, Sharon. I now would like to call on Ms. Sivananthi Thanantiran, the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, or ARO. Sivananthi brings a very interesting perspective in this conversation, because ARO is also one of the lead civil society organization on the Action Coalition on Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. Sivananthi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mavic. Firstly, I think congratulations are in order to all of you on the adoption of the Generation Equality Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action. So women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas, which are extremely relevant for ARRO's advocacy on sexual and reproductive health and rights, given the context that, you know, rape and violence against women continue to be employed as a weapon of war and terrorism to humiliate and instill fear in a community and against particular groups, right? And women and girls are largely made systematically invisible, not only in the conflict resolutions and peace building processes, but also in all of the other decision-making spaces, including decisions regarding their own bodies around sexual and reproductive health. And it has made it impossible to kind of get their stories, their experiences, and their perspectives into the picture while these policies and these programs are being rolled out. So what we can also see in our region, as you may know, Mavik, in post-conflict societies such as Afghanistan, Aceh, the autonomous region of Mindanao, we have seen the continuing focus of local policymakers in regulating women's bodies, right? Women's movement, women's rights, and women's empowerment, with particular attention to women's sexuality and sexual and reproductive rights. So we can see that this is an agenda which exists both within the conflict time as well as the post-conflict time. It is a continuing critical threat across both these times. So this agenda, we can see, has also become particularly important in this time of COVID-19, where we've already noted across many countries the denial of health, economic and social welfare benefits to refugees fleeing conflict, and crisis has been widely noted already, you know, and they're pushing women and children in conflict-ridden areas into further vulnerability, where it might be almost difficult for us to like kind of bring them back to a sort of any sort of field where they can enjoy some of their rights. The other thing that we wanted to also note is seems to be a rise of parochial nationalism and calling governments to focus actions on immediate and majoritarian constituency. And this is also deeply worrying because this may give rise to further internal and border strife and conflict. And in this initiative is forward-looking, you know, and it anticipates the challenges to the achievement of gender equality, especially for these most vulnerable populations, in a forward-looking manner. So the actions proposed in the compact, you know, we feel are grounded on the principles of the Beijing Platform for Action, which most of us in the feminist and women's rights movement continue to hold close to our heart, and the agenda of women and youth, peace and security, and Resolution 1325. The Compact's commitment to harness existing extensive normative frameworks on women, peace and security and humanitarian action, and accompanying institutional and coordinating mechanisms to carry out and realize the commitments is crucial for the entire feminist agenda. And you also asked me, how is this like, because we are part of the SRHR Action Coalition leadership group for bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, is that we actually feel that the uniqueness of this compact is that the issues of women, peace and security and humanitarian action cuts across all of the action coalitions. And for the SRHR Action Coalitions, women's participation in decision-making and governance, you know, establishing, monitoring, and accountability are equally crucial. The issues are also integral to the Action Coalition on Violence Against Women and Girls, which is another major aspect of the SRHR Coalition, especially in regards to the sexual violence that we've been talking about. The compact can therefore be a bridge on issues that are common for the different action coalitions and play a crucial role in accelerating actions of the coalitions. So this will further strengthen the agenda of women, peace and security and humanitarian action. Excuse me. Yeah, so in the context of increasing pushback on women's human rights and women, peace and security agenda, the compact is crucial in its call for an end to impunity for crimes against women and girls in conflict by demanding the prosecution of perpetrators of sexual and gender-based violence and the transformation of regressive legal and judicial institutions and transitional justice processes. So we think that also the domestication of all the international commitments for women, youth, and peace and security should be a key focus of this partnership. The domestication process should engage women and young people from diverse communities in these conflict-ridden areas, and that the national policies should be backed by adequate funding for their implementation. Thank you, Mavic.
Thank you so much, Sivananthi, for that very rich presentation. And I would like to also emphasize that the sexual and reproductive health and rights has become much more integral to the Women, Peace and Security agenda through the years. Resolution 2106 on Women, Peace and Security, one of the supporting resolutions to 1325, has actually called on member states and the UN and other actors to guarantee sexual and reproductive health care, especially to victims and survivors of sexual violence and conflict. And you joining us now, and of course, Arrow has always been one of the most active members of the coalition, civil society coalition on women, peace and security and youth, peace and security. We are ensured that we always have that agenda, you know, up front and center. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to, request again, Deputy Executive Director Regner, Sivananthi, and Sharon to stay on, because this is an exciting, the next part is an exciting part of our conversation, where we will be requesting civil society leaders from different parts of the world representing big networks themselves to interact with you. And I'm also excited to point out that many of our participants this morning or afternoon or evening are representing grassroots organizations. So we have participants from Cameroon, DRC, Afghanistan, Colombia, and many other countries. So without further ado, I would now like to call on, and I would emphasize with much pleasure and pride, my co-moderator this morning, Ms. Malika Iyer, Program Officer of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders. And true to our advocacy of women, peace and security and youth peace and security, I always like to joke that I am representing the youth peace and security agenda, and she's representing the women, peace and security agenda. Of course, that's a joke. So I will now call on Malika Iyer, an amazing young woman leader who has been coordinating all of our work on the youth peace and security agenda.
Thank you, Mavic. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everyone wherever you are in the world. It's my pleasure to be with you today. And although the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action was adopted before I was born, I am equally excited about its 25th anniversary and the critical moment the Generation Equality Forum presents. Over the years, the legal and policy frameworks for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security resolutions have been strengthened, particularly at the international and regional levels. However, the actual implementation remains slow and uneven, particularly at national and local levels. Political and economic exclusion of women and their marginalization in peace and security processes and humanitarian action are among key challenges to the full and effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Moreover, the Women, Peace and Security agenda's implementation is not adequately funded, and local women, peace builders, and humanitarian responders remain unrecognized and unprotected. So it's unsurprising that there is a gap between progressive and transformative policies on women, peace and security, youth peace and security, and humanitarian action at global, regional, and national levels, and the necessary transformative action in local communities. The Generation Equality Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action has this potential to realize commitments and galvanize global action to accelerating implementation, strengthening accountability, and mobilizing funding for the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action frameworks, along with the Youth Peace and Security agenda. However, it's important for us to note that the meaningful participation of local women peace builders and crisis-affected women, young women, adolescent girls, and gender non-conforming persons is critical in the design and implementation of the compact to ensure that it is fit for purpose. So with that, I now have the pleasure to introduce members of the civil society-led Beijing+25 Women, Peace and Security, Youth Peace and Security Coalition, who will pose questions to the panelists about the compact. Established in December 2019, the civil society-led coalition represents over 100 grassroots women and youth peace builders, national, regional, and global women's rights and feminist organizations, and civil society networks from around the world who are working toward the full and effective implementation of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agendas. First, we have Hajer Sharif, who is the founder of Together We Build It Libya. Hajer, the floor is yours.
She's muted.
Mm-hmm.
Hajer, your microphone is muted.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So sorry, I had issues with my internet. Thank you very much for inviting me to pose the questions, and GNWP, thank you very much for this initiative. It's absolutely highly important. After listening to all the previous speakers, I think perhaps one of the most important questions I have is, when we look at 1325 and the WPS agenda, especially from the perspective of women's participation in peace building and peace processes, one of the issues that always raise as a problem is political will. And when I look at the compact structure, the board structure particularly, I see that there's going to be from 4 to 6 member states. And while that is absolutely amazing for sure in terms of establishing and strengthening partnerships between civil society, non-governmental organizations working on WPS and member states, I can't help myself but wonder, how will the compact be able to critically and independently raise and tackle the issue of political will from member states, whether on an international level or a national level? This is my first question. My second question is regarding intergenerational co-leadership. I know we heard from some of the speakers, if not all of them, emphasize the important role of young women's participation in the different coalitions, but also the note on the compact ensures that as well and encourage it. But I'm wondering, did perhaps the compact or the task force already thought of how they will be able to systematically ensure an intergenerational co-leadership approach with the work of the compact? Thank you.
Thank you, Hajer. Next, I would like to call on Mimidu Achakpa, who is the national coordinator from Women in Humanitarian Response in the Nigeria Initiative Response Network. She is also a member of Feminist Humanitarian Network. The floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. It's afternoon here in Nigeria and it's raining as I speak. My name once again is Mimido Achakpa from, I coordinate the Women in Humanitarian Response in Nigeria initiative, a network of over 100 women-led, women-headed organizations involved in humanitarian response in Nigeria. But I'm here representing the Feminist Humanitarian Network. And I have 2 questions. My questions will come from the point of the humanitarian response angle. And my first question would be, in what way do you conceive that the Compact Coalition can take a feminist approach to mainstreaming humanitarian action? And my second question would be, what role do you envision the Compact taking in ensuring that the commitments of the Grand Bargain are upheld, particularly with regard to funding for local actors and specifically women-led local actors? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mimidou. I would like to pass it on now to Ms. Nydia Beltran, who is the coordinator of Amasuru from Latin America.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nydia Beltran. I'm coordinator at Amasuru. We are a network of women working on security and defense issues in Latin America and the Caribbean. Our questions are related to two concerns that we have. The first one is the Compact Group has a plan to strengthening accountability mechanisms to measure member states' progress concerning inclusion and actions on women peace security and youth peace security in national agendas. What is the Compact Group going to do with countries that don't sufficiently report these indicators or don't show improvement in them? And the second one is, one of the Compact Group objectives is mobilizing funding to ensure that a broad spectrum of civil society actors is able to meaningfully participate in key activities of the Compact and the Generation Equality Forum, like this event that we are attending today. So do you think that this event developed in English and with access only through internet is a good starting point needing to amplify participation to non-English speakers and those with a lack of internet access? Would a phased plan to amplify the voices of women and youth peace builders be a logical next step? Thank you.
Thank you, Nydia. Next, I will pass it over to Ms. Gloria Fataki, who is the founder and president of Inclusive Society from France.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. So my name is Gloria Fataki, founder and president of Inclusive Society, who is supporting social inclusion and economic empowerment through education, professional insertion.
Gloria, your internet seems unstable. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to ask Helen, our next respondent, to ask her question. Perhaps in the meantime, you can try seeing if you can move to a different spot where your internet might be stronger. I will pass it over to Ms. Helen Kezenyoho, who is the Executive Director of Women's International Peace Center from Uganda.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Global Network for Women Peace Builders, for organizing this very important meeting, and I really love the turnout. In terms of practicalities, I hear about enhanced coordination, from the presenters and translating commitment into action. And I'm wondering what practical measures can the soon-to-be formed Compact Coalition Board take to ensure the participation of diverse members of civil society in achieving the Compact's purpose, considering the differences in language, as mentioned by my colleague here, the digital divide, and the need to deliberately include specific categories of women in civil society. I'm talking about women refugees, women IDPs, and women grassroots peace builders who usually may not have access to this. How do we ensure that they are part of, part of this whole new compact and can also contribute to achieving the objectives? My second question is, looking at the issues of accountability, we have a number of ongoing interventions, work at regional levels, African Union, regional economic communities to support member states in delivering on the women, peace and security and humanitarian action commitments. How do you see the monitoring and accountability mechanism of the compact linking with these regional efforts. For example, at the African Union, the Office of the Special Envoy has developed the Continental Resort Framework for monitoring the Women, Peace and Security agenda. How are you going to be building on existing work, at regional level that enables countries to report on the WPS? Thank you very much, Malika.
Thank you very much, Helen. Gloria, back to you if you have stronger internet. Gloria, are you able to hear me?
Malika, I suggest we turn back to Gloria later. Hopefully we still have more time.
Yes, so with that, I thank all the respondents for their very, very powerful questions. And I would like to first pass it to Ambassador Soleimani to respond. And perhaps I can summarize some of the questions that we've received, because I know there were a lot, and I want to make sure that we are able to substantially discuss.
Yeah, Malika, she had to leave the meeting earlier, but I'm hoping there's another representative of the permanent mission of Sierra Leone. If not, let's request the other panelists.
Yes, okay. So then we'll begin with Ms. Regner. But first, let me summarize some of the questions we received on political will. How will the compact tackle the problem of a lack of political will and engage member states that may or may not be progressing on the women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, and humanitarian action frameworks? How will intergenerational dialogue and the meaningful participation of young women as a specific group be integrated within the compact and systematized? And along the same lines, how will the compact engage grassroots women and youth peace builders who do not have access to the internet, may not speak English, or may come from displaced backgrounds such as refugee and IDP women? Then we received questions on how the compact will take a feminist approach to humanitarian action and how the compact will uphold or advocate for the commitments of the Grand Bargain to be implemented. Finally, we received questions on the practical measures that the compact can take to build on the existing progress that has already been made, particularly by regional institutions such as the African Union, on monitoring and evaluation. So with that, Ms. Regner, I will call on you to respond.
Hello.
Thank you so much for those very insightful comments and questions. And I have also experts with me who are working on this more on a daily basis. And I think that I just wanted to comment on the fact that the political will, accountability and responsibility from member states is actually what this is about. And the fact that countries have been eager to talk, which is good, we're happy about that, but not as eager to actually create systems for implementation. The fact that women have not been included when the critical decisions are taken, and the fact that these plans and the work has not been funded, that is exactly what we want to do something about together in this compact. So that are strategies that we are obviously working on and want to have more in detail all of these discussions about with all of you. How to include young activists? Well, the main idea is actually for this to be driven by young activists all around the world, together with civil society of all ages, women's movement, governments, private sector, etc. I also, the question about how to support countries that don't report adequately, I think is a very important point. And I think that to have, as the report from the Secretary General says, a data revolution, as it's called in there, is a goal in itself, to be able to know much more and increase and improve data and reporting is also one of the goals.
I would perhaps pass to my colleagues to discuss the points on the internet access and the language issues. They are very important rights and political issues, but they're also kind of technical to their nature. So I would ask Harriet perhaps or David to comment on that. Thank you so much for having me, and I really look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Regner. Next, Ms. Bagwan-Rose, would you like to respond to some of the questions?
Yes, thanks so much. I think I'll talk first about, clearly the focus of the compact is, as this was being developed as it has been stated, is to get monitoring and accountability, get it better. I can remember sitting, at the United Nations more than 15 years ago, soon after the adoption of 1325, when member states found it very difficult to agree on monitoring and accountability frameworks, or particularly monitoring frameworks. They do get a little sensitive. So I think for me, this is about making the linkages and the connections with treaty body accountability, because for far too long, the WPS agenda has only sat within the Security Council. So there's an important need to connect it back to member state accountability and reporting through the UPR, through CEDAW, and other treaty obligations as well. And this could be unpacked further by the board members as they develop the work going forward. But there are indicators in terms of CEDAW and all that suite of human rights treaties. I do want to talk about participation, and I take the point completely, being across a massive ocean and living in a region where we're not one big landmass, we're many islands connected by the Blue Pacific. And that's been a challenge for us to be able to say, how do we get young women, women with disabilities, rural and coastal women engaging in this process to talk about their peace and security and humanitarian action. So I feel it comes back to the resourcing also of civil society to be able to drive innovation in the way in which we can organize and channel information into these processes. So I think that's really important. That's what I was talking about in terms of these on the map sessions that we've been organizing here in the Pacific this week. So participation can also then support the intergenerational learning, because I think we're at a place now where, for those of us who've had this journey, in the lead up to and since Beijing, it is really critical that we are committed to an intergenerational process and the 10 years going forward, making sure that the resources are there for young women to take the leadership and not have to go through the same struggle as many of us have had to do in getting the resources to do this work on the ground. I think the issue also around the grand bargain that Mimidu posted is really important as well. And there's an opportunity right now, because there is the localization work stream where it does talk about the accountability back to women-led humanitarian action and the resources, and how do we identify the modalities. So this is also about finding the modalities of work in our different regions, in our different countries, so we can show both the way in which the work is being done on the ground, but also the way in which resources can reach women directly to be able to do the work in a way that is not cumbersome and exhausting, so I think that's really important. And finally, I think the role, as you see in the concept note of the compact, the role of regional intergovernmental organizations are going to be very critical, because they do provide an important linkage for the member states as well. And I would also say that the accountability also of regional intergovernmental organizations to ensure women and young women working around this issue of WPS humanitarian action and the YPS agenda are reorganized and the table is redesigned so that we become a better part of the conversation as well. Thanks, Malika.
Thank you, Sharon. I see that Gloria has rejoined us. So Gloria, over to you to ask your questions. And just to reintroduce Gloria, she is the founder and president of Inclusive Society from France.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me for some connection issue. So thank you for being with us. As Malika said, I'm Gloria Fataki, founder and president of Inclusive Society. We are supporting social inclusion and economic empowerment through education, professional insertion, and leadership. And we are convinced that without peace and security, it's extremely difficult to implement sustainable actions. That's why we joined this coalition, Beijing+25, Women, Peace and Security. So I have two questions for the panelists. So Ambassador Delphine O just announced the launch of the third French National Action Plan on Peace and Security. So we would like to know how we could convince a large number of states to develop national plans on women, peace and security, especially in Africa, and how the compact could provide technical support to members of states to align national and regional action plan with global normative framework. And also, my second question, earlier, Ambassador Alicia Buenrostro mentioned the fact that the compact should be intersectional. So my question is, what are the key success criteria for the compact to be inclusive and intersectional? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria. Over to Ms. Tanetiran from Aero to respond to some of the questions.
Thanks, Malika. I think that one of the key things that we are all struggling with in this COVID-19 environment is the ability to participate in many forums to make sure that this participation is as inclusive and as broad as possible. And the third thing that is that our participation is able to hold our governments accountable, right? So this COVID situation has made that all just far more difficult. However, we have to think of new ways of how we can actually engage. And while technology facilitates some groups' participation, it's also a barrier to many others. So perhaps, it's a time for us to, one of the ways we can think is that we can actually build a chain link of communications in order to ensure that many of those groups that we are concerned that should be, they're not just existing as words on the document, but that the participation is actually real and realized, is we've got to make sure that the resources are there, but also that the way that we link up the groups within these kind of new mediums that we are all engaged in also has to be worked harder at. The second thing about young women's co-leadership in the compact, as well as across all of the Action Coalition, I think that this is something that all of us are very cognizant of. If we're talking about a generation equality forum, this is actually for that next generation, and that generation should be at the center and the driving seat, of this entire generation equality forum. So within the Action Coalitions, we are actually including more young people within it, and in the leadership. I think the Civil Society Advisory Group has also brought in the Youth Task Force so that we can work seamlessly together. And these are some of the models that perhaps can also be adopted, within the work of the compact. The third thing is, of course, one of the reasons that many of us took up positions or applied to be part of the Action Coalition Leadership Group is because we really want to make sure that we get accountability for the work that we are doing, because for all of the advocacy we've done, the monitoring and the evaluation, and our egging on of our governments, right? Yet today, women on the ground are facing far more challenges than we've ever faced. And at the same time, the gains have not been so meaningful to most of the women of the world, right? So we really think that the Generation Equality, all action coalitions of the Generation Equality Forum should have those national plans of action that all governments, even if the governments just belong to one action coalition, but they should make commitment to progress towards all of the themes that are there, right? So that's what all of us have to see build also the intersectional links, not only between the compact and the action coalitions, but across all of the other action coalitions. Because in the SRHR Action Coalition, what is very clear is that economic justice is linked to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Climate justice is linked to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Technology is also linked to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So and gender-based violence, of course, is linked to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So how do we ensure that governments are also able to rise up and see that bigger picture, right? So that's a challenge for all of us, but definitely we do want to make this something that we can hold up to the governments and say that you've committed to this and we really need action right now on it.
Thank you very much for those excellent responses and questions. Audience members, I will now read out some of your questions and direct them to the UN Women team of Harriet Williams-Bright and David Kofi. It is our intention to make this discussion as interactive as possible to reflect civil society hopes, priorities, and recommendations for the Generation Equality Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action. But before I do so, I would like to highlight a report prepared from civil society activists led by the Women, Peace and Security Network in Canada to the Women, Peace and Security Focal Points Network. The report also contains important recommendations for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and the link has been shared in the chat. So with that, two important questions from the question and answer section of Zoom were: how will men and young boys be engaged in the compact, and how will the compact address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic? Over to you, Harriet or David, if you would like to respond.
Hi, everyone. This is Harriet, and I just want to thank GNWP and all the women's organizations and networks who have been part of this process and are joining us here today. Before going to the questions, I really just want to highlight also that this process is an ongoing process that will require the feedback and support from all of you for it to be successful. As you know, the Compact is part of the Generation Equality Forum, but it was also one of the outcomes of the remarkable advocacy from civil society organizations. And so that continued support in shaping the Compact is going to be very important and useful. I wanted to also highlight some of the key components of the Compact. And one of the key areas that the Compact wants to highlight is around accountability. And in that sense, the Compact wants to build on the existing commitments that we have on women, peace and security, and also on humanitarian action. And why humanitarian action is that we also see the opportunity here after 20 years to build strong synergy between what is happening on humanitarian and crisis response, and also how that can also can impact and elevate the work of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and vice versa. So it's really an important element that we want to highlight as we go forward. And on the accountability process, the Compact will seek to really shine a light on the existing commitments. So it's less of creating new commitments and more around looking at the extensive normative framework that we have, starting with the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and all the commitments around humanitarian action, but also all the WPS resolutions and work that is being done at global level, at regional level, at national level, and particularly the work of women peace builders at local level. So we really see this as an opportunity to take stock of where we've come from and what we can do to ensure that we can build the peer accountability to implement all these really, really important commitments. And then the other thing on coordination, and this is where your support is going to be important, for us to be able to reach all the relevant stakeholders at all levels, we would really encourage the partnership that we have through the board, but also with catalytic members to reach your networks and to make this a truly inclusive and intersectional process. So in terms of how do we engage young women, how do we engage young men, how do we engage partners who don't have access to the internet, we really count on all of you here today to really see and inform us, and also to provide that advice on how we can make this a truly integrative process going forward. So as we look beyond October this year, we'll be addressing stakeholder consultations, ensuring that we have engagement with as many partners as possible, and really want everyone to be involved in this process going forward. Thank you, and I can hand over to David if he wants to respond on some of the questions.
Thanks very much, Harriet, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. The question with regards to COVID-19, I mean, I think that also, I mean, my answer to this also speaks to the question that was raised about how we're going to take a feminist approach to humanitarian action through the compact. And I mean, we need to be looking at women and girls in humanitarian action through a broader lens than women and girls as victims, as individuals that need to have solutions handed to them. We need to be looking at it in terms of what is their role in the leadership of humanitarian response, including in COVID-19. To what degree is their participation facilitated, their voices raised in the decision-making processes. I think I read a statistic yesterday that globally across all nations, only 24% of COVID-19 response committees or response programs have women in leadership roles. We need to be looking at long-term durable solutions for women and girls, well, for all people in humanitarian settings, because as we all know, the majority of humanitarian contexts now are protracted, years-long, if not decades-long settings. So we need to be looking beyond immediate response. We need to be looking at what are their long-term needs, be it education, be it livelihoods, be it skills training. And what is it specifically that women and girls need? So that needs to be done through gender analysis, having a proper understanding of what any given crisis impact is on men, women, boys, and girls, and what needs to be addressed, and what are their specific opinions on how to go about addressing them. We need to be looking at funding for local women's rights organizations. It needs to go beyond just expecting them to be at the front line and funding them on a project by project basis. They need to have sustained, durable, reliable funding so that they can build a capacity and are able to engage on a consistent basis. Women and girls, they need to be counted and registered as individuals, and not as dependents of their family status or the relationship to male members. And as Harriet mentioned, you know, a lot of this is already covered in a lot of the resolutions and the agreements and the commitments that have been made, be it in the Agenda for Humanity from the World Humanitarian Summit, the Global Compact on Refugees, the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants, and so on. You know, the language is already embedded there about taking this feminist approach to humanitarian action, but there's so many disparate, there's such a broad range of these resolutions, of these commitments, but there is no centralized monitoring and accountability mechanism to allow us to have a clear understanding of what progress has been made or otherwise, and what needs to be done to address that, and what actions need to be taken so that that we can deliver on those commitments and keep pushing the needle forwards for you know, delivering on the needs and the empowerment of women and girls in crisis settings. Over.
Thank you so much, David and Harriet. And thank you to all of our audience members who have been asking such important questions. I now need to close the Q&A portion of this event, but we will do our best to respond to the remaining questions through the blog that we will post on our website about this event. With that, I pass it back to you, Mavic, to do our closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Malika. The Compact on Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action brings a lot of promises. Promises of acceleration, of implementation, coherence and synergy across the different mandates in the United Nations and regional organizations and member states, and including us, civil society, mobilizing resources, accountability, and most especially including voices that are often unheard and unrepresented. Those are the local women peace builders and first responders and youth activists on the ground. It is very important to know that the two main policy documents that is guiding the work of the Compact, which are the Beijing Platform for Action and the Security Council Resolution 1325, both of them were adopted because of women civil society activism and the support of colleagues within the United Nations and among member states. It is a testament to that, the power of partnership, our collective force when we come together to achieve a shared vision. The Compact is the same. It calls for that kind of partnership and vision that could only be realized if we again come together and translate all of these beautiful words into realistic and practical action on the ground. And as some of our panelists have mentioned, we are faced with unprecedented multi-dimensional conflict and crisis. And this requires the same multi-sectoral, intersectional response, cooperation from among all of us. So the Civil Society Coalition and Women, Peace and Security, Youth Peace and Security, and Humanitarian Action is committed to working with everyone, and we expect the same from all of our partners. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I'm sure all of us will be following closely the presentation of the governance structure of the Compact around the end of this month. We will stay closely in touch. Thank you, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you.